Commander Marcus Chen stood at the window of the transport ship and watched the massive alien vessel grow larger. The Zilithian Empire's capital ship was bigger than any human city. Its dark metal surface was covered with strange, glowing symbols that hurt his eyes to look at directly. Marcus felt sick to his stomach. 3 months ago, he was leading normal military operations on Earth. Now he was traveling through space to meet with aliens who could destroy his entire planet with a single command. The Zilithian Empire had found Earth by accident while mapping new star systems. Their first message was simple: submit or be destroyed. Earth's leaders had 2 weeks to send someone to discuss terms. Marcus was chosen because of his military background and his ability to stay calm under pressure. What they did not tell him was that no one expected him to come back alive. This was likely a one-way trip. The transport ship docked with a soft bump. Marcus picked up his small bag of belongings and walked toward the airlock. His escort was a tall, thin alien with gray skin and large black eyes. It had not spoken a single word during the entire journey. The airlock opened with a hiss. Marcus stepped into the Zilithian ship and immediately felt like he was in a different world. The walls seemed to be made of living crystal that pulsed with soft blue light. The air tasted metallic and made his tongue feel strange. Everything was too quiet, as if sound itself was being absorbed by the walls. His escort led him down a long hallway. Marcus noticed there were no doors anywhere, just openings that appeared in the walls as they approached and closed behind them. Other Zilithians moved past them in the hallway, all tall and thin with the same gray skin and black eyes. None of them looked at Marcus directly, but he could feel them watching him somehow. They entered a vast chamber that took Marcus's breath away. The ceiling disappeared into darkness high above. Hundreds of Zilithians sat on floating platforms arranged in circles around the center of the room. Their eyes all glowed with the same blue light as the walls. In the center of the room was a raised platform where the most important Zilithians sat. Marcus could tell they were important because their skin had silver markings that moved like living tattoos. One of them, wearing a crown made of the same crystal as the walls, stood up as Marcus approached. Marcus's translator device crackled to life in his ear. "Welcome, human from the small world called Earth," the crowned Zilithian said. "I am Emperor Kylon, ruler of the Zilithian Empire. You stand before the High Court to learn of your world's fate." Marcus had practiced his speech many times during the journey. "Your Majesty, I am Commander Marcus Chen, representing Earth and humanity. We come in peace and hope to find a way for our peoples to coexist." The Emperor's large eyes seemed to look right through Marcus. "Your people interest us, human. We have conquered over 10,000 worlds. But yours is different. Tell me, what makes humans special?" Marcus had expected this question. "We are adaptable, Your Majesty. We learn quickly and work together to solve problems. We could be valuable allies rather than subjects." A sound like wind chimes filled the chamber. Marcus realized it was the Zilithians laughing. The Emperor raised a hand, and the sound stopped. "Every species says they are special," the Emperor said. "Yet they all fall to our power the same way. We do not need allies, human. We need only subjects." That was when something unexpected happened. One of the Zilithians, sitting near the Emperor, stood up. She was different from the others. Her skin was lighter, almost silver, and her eyes glowed with purple light instead of blue. The markings on her skin moved faster than the others, creating complex patterns that seemed to tell a story. "Father," she said, and Marcus realized this must be the Emperor's daughter. "May I examine this human more closely?" The Emperor looked surprised but nodded. "If you wish, Zephyra. But do not waste too much time on this creature." Princess Zephyra stepped down from the platform and walked toward Marcus. As she got closer, he could feel a strange pressure in his head, like someone trying to push their way into his thoughts. The feeling grew stronger as she approached, but nothing happened. The pressure remained, just pressure. The princess stopped in front of Marcus, her purple eyes wide with surprise. She reached out with one long finger and touched his forehead. The pressure in his head became almost painful. But still nothing happened. "Impossible," she whispered, so quietly that only Marcus could hear. Then she turned to face the entire court and spoke in a loud, clear voice. "Members of the High Court," Princess Zephyra said, "I have made a discovery. This human cannot be read by our minds. His thoughts are completely hidden from us." The chamber erupted in noise. Zilithians began making sounds Marcus had never heard before, like metal scraping against stone mixed with musical notes. His translator struggled to keep up with all the different voices. "This has never happened before," one of the court members said. "No creature can resist our mental touch." "It must be some kind of trick," another voice called out. "Humans are too primitive to have such abilities." But Princess Zephyra raised her hand and the voices stopped. She looked directly into Marcus's eyes, and he felt something he had not expected. She seemed almost excited, like a scientist who had just discovered something new and wonderful. "There is more," she said to the court. "Our ancient prophecies speak of the Mindless One, a being whose thoughts cannot be touched by ours. The prophecies say this being will come when our empire reaches its greatest extent. They say he will either destroy us or help us evolve into something greater." The emperor leaned forward in his throne. "Zephyra, what are you suggesting?" The princess turned to face her father. But her words were meant for everyone in the chamber. "I am suggesting that this human is the one spoken of in prophecy. And according to our laws, the Mindless One must be bound to our royal line through marriage." She turned back to Marcus and spoke words that would change both their lives forever. "Before this entire court, I declare this human to be my destined mate. He will marry me and become prince consort of the Zilithian Empire. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. His translator device was still working perfectly, so he had heard every word correctly. Somehow, in trying to save Earth from destruction, he had just been told he was going to marry an alien princess. The court exploded into chaos once again. But through all the noise, Marcus could only stare at Princess Zephyra, wondering if his life had just become much better or much worse. Marcus spent the night in quarters that were bigger than his apartment back on Earth. The walls were made of the same crystal as the rest of the ship, but these glowed with soft white light instead of blue. There was no bed as humans understood it, just a platform that seemed to mold itself to his body when he lay down. Sleep had been impossible. Every few minutes, Marcus remembered the princess's words in the court chamber. "Marriage. To an alien. To save Earth." He kept thinking this had to be some kind of nightmare. But the strange taste in the air and the low humming of the ship's engines reminded him it was all real. In the morning, Princess Zephyra came to visit him. She moved differently than the other Zilithians Marcus had seen. Where they glided smoothly, she walked with quick, energetic steps. Her silver skin caught the light from the walls and made her seem to shimmer. "You look tired, Marcus," she said, sitting on a chair that grew out of the floor as she approached it. "Did you not rest well?" Marcus noticed she was using his first name now, not his title. "It's been a lot to process, Your Highness. Yesterday I came here expecting to negotiate for my planet's survival. Now I'm apparently engaged to be married." Zephyra's purple eyes brightened, which Marcus was beginning to understand meant she was amused. "You do not seem pleased about this arrangement." "It's not that," Marcus said quickly, not wanting to offend someone who could probably have him killed with a word. "It's just very sudden, and I don't understand what you meant about prophecies." Zephyra stood up and walked to the crystal wall. She touched it with her palm, and the wall became transparent, showing the vast emptiness of space outside. "Marcus, do you know how long the Zilithian Empire has existed?" "A few thousand years?" "Over 10,000 of your years," Zephyra corrected. "In all that time, we have conquered every species we have encountered. Not through superior weapons, though we have those. Not through greater numbers, though we have millions of ships. We conquer through our minds." She turned back to face him. "Every Zilithian is connected to every other Zilithian through what you might call telepathy. We can share thoughts instantly across any distance. When we attack a world, we move as one perfect unit. No enemy can surprise us because we know what each of our ships is thinking at all times." Marcus began to understand. That's why you were so shocked when you couldn't read my mind. Exactly. In 10,000 years, we have never met a mind we could not touch. Every creature thinks in patterns we can predict and understand. But you, she paused, searching for the right words. You think in ways that make no sense to us. Your thoughts follow paths we cannot see. And the prophecy? Zephyra touched the wall again, and it displayed symbols that hurt Marcus's eyes to look at directly. These are the words of our greatest prophet, spoken 5,000 years ago. She said that when our empire reached its full size, we would meet the Mindless One, a being whose thoughts could not be touched by ours. She said this being would either bring about our destruction or help us become something greater than we are. Marcus stared at the symbols. And you think that's me? I know it is you. And according to our laws, the Mindless One must be joined to our royal family. It is the only way to ensure they help us rather than destroy us. Before Marcus could respond, the door opened and another Zilithian entered. This one was older than the others Marcus had seen. With skin that had turned almost black with age, the silver markings on his body moved slowly, like thick liquid. Princess, the newcomer said, his voice cold. You should not be speaking alone with this creature. Zephyra's markings began moving faster. High Chancellor Vorthak. This creature is my intended mate. Show proper respect. Vorthak's black eyes fixed on Marcus with obvious hatred. Your Highness. With respect. This human is dangerous. The prophecy speaks of the Mindless One bringing destruction. We should eliminate this threat before it can harm the Empire. The prophecy speaks of evolution as well as destruction, Zephyra replied. My choice has been made. Your father the Emperor may not agree with your choice, Vorthak said. There are many in the court who believe this human should be destroyed immediately. Also, after Vorthak left, Zephyra sat back down. Her markings were still moving quickly, and Marcus could tell she was upset. Is he right? Marcus asked. Does your father oppose this marriage? My father follows the old ways, Zephyra said. He believes in conquest and control. He does not understand that our empire has stopped growing because we have become predictable. We solve every problem the same way. We think the same thoughts. We have become. Over the following days, Marcus was given access to the ship's information systems. What he learned amazed and worried him. The Zilithian Empire was vast beyond imagination, controlling millions of worlds and trillions of beings. But as he studied their history, he began to see what Zephyra meant about stagnation. For the last 1,000 years, the Empire had barely changed. Their technology had stopped improving. Their art all looked the same. Their military tactics had not evolved at all. They were incredibly efficient, but they had lost the ability to innovate. Marcus realized this was both their greatest strength and their greatest weakness. Their mental connection allowed perfect coordination, but it also meant no one could have a truly new idea. Every thought was immediately shared and processed by the group mind, filtered through 10,000 years of existing patterns. During his study sessions, Marcus noticed something else. The Zilithians around him moved in very predictable ways. When they faced a problem, they always tried the same solutions in the same order. When they spoke to each other, their conversations followed preset patterns. It was like watching a computer program run the same code over and over again. Marcus began an experiment. During his daily walks around the ship, he would deliberately do unexpected things. He would suddenly change direction, or stop to examine something random, or ask questions that didn't follow logically from what they had been discussing. Each time he did something unpredictable, the Zilithians around him seemed briefly confused. Their movements became less smooth. Their conversations stumbled. It was as if his unpredictable behavior was creating tiny glitches in their perfect mental coordination. One evening, as Marcus was returning to his quarters, he noticed he was being followed. 3 Zilithians in dark robes stayed exactly 50 feet behind him as he walked. When he turned a corner, they turned. When he stopped, they stopped. Marcus realized that High Chancellor Vorthak was probably not going to wait for a formal decision about his fate. If Vorthak saw him as a threat to the Empire, he might try to eliminate that threat himself. As Marcus reached his quarters, he made a decision. If he was going to survive long enough to help Earth, he needed to understand the Zilithians better. And if Zephyra was right about the prophecy, maybe his ability to think unpredictable thoughts was exactly what this ancient empire needed. But first, he had to stay alive long enough to find out. 3 days later, Princess Zephyra invited Marcus to attend a War Council meeting. "I want the military commanders to see what you can do," she explained as they walked through the ship's corridors. "They need to understand why the prophecy speaks of evolution, not just destruction." The war room was enormous, with a 3-dimensional star map floating in the center. Dozens of Zilithian military officers stood around the map, their silver markings moving in perfect synchronization as they shared thoughts and information instantly. General Thaxon, the Empire's chief military commander, acknowledged Marcus with a cold nod. "Princess, why have you brought this human to our planning session? This is sensitive military information." "Because he may have insights we lack," Zephyra replied. "Show him the Kethvar situation." The star map zoomed in to show a solar system with 7 planets. Red symbols marked rebel positions, while blue symbols showed Zilithian forces. General Thaxon touched the map and began explaining. "The Kethvar system has been in rebellion for 8 months," he said. "They have positioned their defense platforms here, here, and here." Red dots appeared on the map. "Our standard attack formation will overwhelm their defenses within 6 hours." Marcus studied the map carefully. The Zilithian attack plan was exactly what he would have expected from them. A perfectly coordinated frontal assault using superior numbers. It would work, but it would also cost thousands of lives on both sides. "General," Marcus said carefully, "may I ask a question about the rebel positions?" General Thaxon's markings moved faster, showing his irritation. What could a primitive human possibly understand about space warfare? "Marcus," Zephyra said firmly, "ask your question. Why are the rebels placing their defense platforms in those exact positions? It seems like an inefficient defensive formation." The general's large eyes narrowed. "Those positions provide maximum coverage of the system's approach routes. It is the logical defensive strategy." Marcus nodded. "It's logical if you're thinking like a Zilithian. But what if they're not trying to stop you from entering the system? What if they're trying to force you to attack from a specific direction?" He pointed at the map. "Look at the pattern. Those defense platforms form a funnel. They're not trying to block you out. They're trying to channel you in. There must be a trap waiting where that funnel leads." The Zilithian officers all turned to stare at Marcus. General Thaxon's markings were moving so fast they looked like liquid silver. "Impossible," the general said. "Our intelligence shows no hidden weapons in that area." "Maybe not weapons," Marcus said. "But what else could be there? Asteroids that could be moved into your path? A gravity well you haven't detected? Some kind of minefield?" Princess Zephyra touched the map, and the view shifted. "Computer? Scan for gravitational anomalies in the target zone." A moment later, new symbols appeared on the map. Hidden behind one of the system's gas giants was a cluster of massive objects that had been invisible to the Zilithian scanners. "Asteroid mining platforms," General Thaxon said, his voice filled with amazement. "Fitted with gravity manipulation devices. They were planning to create an artificial gravity field to trap our ships." "So what do you do instead?" Marcus asked. For the next hour, Marcus worked with the Zilithian officers to develop a new attack plan. Instead of attacking through the obvious route, they would come in from an unexpected angle, using the system's asteroid belt for cover. It was more complex than their usual strategy, but it would save thousands of lives. The plan worked perfectly. Within 2 days, reports came back that the Kethvar system had surrendered without a single shot being fired. The rebels, seeing that their trap had been discovered and avoided, realized their position was hopeless and gave up. General Thaxon sought out Marcus personally to thank him. "Human," he said, "your mind works in ways that are useful. How did you see the trap when our best strategists missed it?" Marcus thought about how to explain. "You all think the same way because you share thoughts. That makes you incredibly efficient, but it also makes you predictable. Sometimes the solution to a problem isn't logical. It's about seeing patterns that don't make sense until you understand what your enemy is really trying to do. Word of Marcus's success spread quickly through the ship. Other military commanders began asking for his input on their campaigns. In each case, Marcus found problems that the Zilithians had missed because their thinking was too structured, too predictable. But not everyone was pleased with Marcus's growing influence. High Chancellor Vorthak and his supporters saw this as proof that the human was dangerous. The assassination attempt came a week later. Marcus was walking back to his quarters after another successful strategy session when he noticed something wrong. The hallway was too empty. Normally, there were always a few Zilithians moving through the corridors. But tonight he saw no one. His instincts, developed through years of military service, told him he was in danger. Instead of continuing to his quarters, Marcus suddenly turned and walked in the opposite direction. Behind him, he heard a soft sound like metal scraping against crystal. Marcus broke into a run. He could hear footsteps pursuing him. But when he looked back, the corridor appeared empty. Some kind of invisibility technology. He realized. He turned another corner and saw Princess Zephyra walking toward him. "Marcus, what are you doing here? Your quarters are in the opposite direction. Someone is trying to kill me," he said quickly. Invisibility technology, 3 or 4 of them. Zephyra's markings began moving rapidly. She touched the wall and spoke in rapid Zilithian. Immediately, the corridor filled with a bright flash of light. The flash revealed 4 figures in dark robes carrying what looked like energy weapons. "Halt!" Zephyra commanded. "By order of the princess, drop your weapons." The assassins hesitated. In that moment of confusion, Marcus acted. He grabbed a decorative crystal sculpture from a nearby alcove and threw it at the nearest assassin. His aim was perfect, and the figure stumbled backward. Zephyra raised her hand, and the assassins collapsed, their weapons clattering to the floor. "Stun weapons," she explained to Marcus. "They will recover, but they will answer questions first." Later, as the assassins were taken away for interrogation, Zephyra and Marcus sat in her private chambers. "Vorthak ordered this," Zephyra said, her voice angry. "He believes you are a threat that must be eliminated before you can corrupt our empire." "Maybe he's right," Marcus said quietly. "Maybe I am a threat. But not in the way he thinks." Zephyra looked at him with those purple eyes that seemed to see everything. "What do you mean?" "Your empire is dying," Marcus said. "Not from outside enemies, but from inside. You've become so efficient, so perfectly coordinated, that you've stopped growing. You've stopped learning. You've stopped becoming better." He stood up and walked to the window, showing the stars outside. "What if instead of conquering Earth, you formed an alliance with us? Humans think differently than Zilithians. We're unpredictable, chaotic, creative. We could help your empire grow again, and your technology could help us defend against whatever other threats are out there in the galaxy." Zephyra was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was thoughtful. "An alliance. Equal partners, rather than masters and subjects. It would be a new kind of empire," Marcus said. "One based on cooperation, instead of conquest." "The court would never accept such an idea. Some of them might. Your military commanders are already seeing the value of thinking differently. Maybe others would too, if given the chance." Zephyra stood and walked over to join him at the window. "You are asking me to help you revolutionize our entire civilization." "I'm asking you to help it evolve," Marcus corrected. "Isn't that what the prophecy was really about? Not destruction, but transformation into something greater?" For the first time since they had met, Princess Zephyra smiled. It was a beautiful expression on her alien features. "Very well, Marcus Chen," she said. "Let us see if we can teach an ancient empire how to change." The bonding ceremony was scheduled to take place in the empire's most sacred location, the Crystal Sanctum, on the capital world of Zilithos Prime. But as the royal fleet traveled toward the ceremony, reports began arriving that changed everything. "Princess," General Thaxon reported during an emergency briefing, "we have a problem." 7 planetary governors have declared their independence from the Empire. They say they no longer wish to be part of a collective consciousness that stifles individual thought. Marcus looked at the star map showing the rebel systems. They were scattered across the Empire, too far apart for the usual coordinated response. They're inspired by what's happening here, aren't they? It appears so, Zephyra said grimly. Word has spread about your successes with our military campaigns. Some Zilithians are beginning to question whether our traditional ways are truly superior. Emperor Kylon's image appeared on the main view screen. His silver markings were moving faster than Marcus had ever seen them, showing his extreme agitation. Zephyra, the Emperor said, you must end this madness immediately. Cancel the bonding ceremony. Execute the human. Our empire is falling apart because of this creature's influence. Father, Zephyr replied calmly. Our empire was already falling apart. It has been stagnant for 1,000 years. Marcus is not the cause of our problems. He is the solution. I will not allow you to destroy everything our people have built, and I will not allow you to prevent us from becoming what we could be. The connection ended abruptly. Marcus realized that the Zilithian Empire was now effectively in civil war, with the royal family split and the military forces choosing sides. Over the next few weeks, the situation grew worse. Traditional Zilithians, led by those loyal to Emperor Kylon and High Chancellor Vorthak, began attacking any system that showed support for the human influence. Progressive Zilithians, inspired by the possibility of individual thought and creativity, fought back. Marcus found himself in an impossible situation. He had come to save Earth, but now his presence was tearing apart the most powerful empire in the galaxy. If the Zilithians destroyed themselves in civil war, other hostile species might move in to fill the power vacuum. Earth could end up facing even worse enemies. I have an idea, Marcus told Zephyra as they watched reports of battles throughout the Empire. Instead of fighting the rebels, what if we talk to them? Talk to them about what? About what they really want. I don't think these systems want to destroy the Empire. I think they want to change it. They want to be part of something voluntary instead of something forced. Zephyra considered this. You want to negotiate with them directly. Yes. And I think I should be the one to do it. They can't read my thoughts, so they'll have to judge me by my actions instead of my intentions. It might be exactly what they need. Against the advice of her military commanders, Zephyra agreed. Marcus began making contact with the rebel systems, offering to meet with their leaders personally. The response was overwhelming. System after system requested meetings with the human who thinks differently. The first negotiation took place in the Korak system, where the local population had driven out their Zilithian governor and declared independence. Marcus met with a council of various alien species who had never been allowed to govern themselves. We do not want war, the Korak's representative said. We simply want the right to think our own thoughts and make our own choices. What if I told you that you could have that and still be part of something larger? Marcus asked. What if the Empire became a voluntary alliance instead of a forced collective? Impossible. Zilithians do not understand voluntary cooperation. Some of them do. Princess Zephyra and the Progressives are willing to try a new way. But they need to know that the alternative to civil war isn't the complete destruction of the Empire. One by one, Marcus convinced rebel systems to stop fighting and start talking. His negotiations succeeded where traditional Zilithian diplomacy had failed because he could offer something no Zilithian could. The promise of genuine choice. But the old guard of the Empire was not going to give up without a fight. As Marcus's diplomatic successes mounted, Emperor Kylon made a desperate decision. He ordered the deployment of the Nightmare Fleet, a secret weapon that had been hidden for centuries. The Nightmare Fleet consisted of 12 massive ships equipped with reality-warping technology. They could appear anywhere in the galaxy instantly and destroy entire star systems with weapons that tore holes in space itself. They are heading for Earth, Zephyra told Marcus grimly. My father has decided that if he cannot stop you, he will destroy your homeworld as an example to other rebels. Marcus felt cold fear grip his heart. How long do we have? 6 hours until they reach Earth's solar system. Our fastest ships cannot intercept them in time. What about the reality warping technology? Could we use that? Only the Nightmare Fleet has those weapons. The technology requires a special type of crystal that exists in only one place in the galaxy. The heart of a dying star in the Omega Nebula. Marcus stared at the star map, his mind racing. How big is this crystal? About the size of your transport ship. Why? Because I have a crazy idea that just might work. Marcus's plan was simple in concept but nearly impossible to execute. A small ship would travel to the Omega Nebula, extract enough of the special crystal to power one reality-warping jump, and use it to appear directly in Earth's solar system ahead of the Nightmare Fleet. The problem was that extracting the crystal required someone to fly directly into the dying star's corona, where the temperatures and radiation would kill any normal crew within seconds. I'll do it, Marcus said simply. Marcus, no, Zephyra protested. The radiation levels will kill you before you can complete the mission. Maybe, but maybe I'll get lucky. And even if I don't, at least Earth will have a chance. What Marcus did not tell Zephyra was that his plan had a second part. If he could get close enough to the Nightmare Fleet, he could transmit Earth's location incorrectly, sending them to empty space while he led them away from his home world. It was a suicide mission, and everyone knew it. As Marcus prepared to leave, something unexpected happened. Dozens of young Zilithian officers volunteered to go with him. Then more. Within an hour, over 200 Zilithians had requested to join the mission. Why? Marcus asked General Thaxon, who was among the volunteers. Because you have shown us something we had forgotten, the general replied. The willingness to sacrifice oneself for strangers. We had thought this was a weakness. Now we see, it might be the greatest strength of all. The mission launched with Marcus in command of a ship crewed entirely by volunteers. As they approached the dying star, Marcus realized that something remarkable had happened. The Zilithians were no longer thinking as a collective. Each of them was making individual choices, acting on personal courage rather than shared programming. They extracted the crystal successfully, though not without cost. Half the crew was killed by radiation exposure. But they had enough power for one jump. As they prepared to use the reality-warping technology, Marcus made one final transmission to Princess Zephyra. If this works, tell your people that change is not something to fear, it's something to embrace. And tell them that humans are honored to call them friends. The ship disappeared in a flash of twisted space, leaving only empty nebula behind. 6 months after the mission to the Omega Nebula, Princess Zephyra stood in the observation deck of the New Alliance flagship, watching Earth grow larger in the view screen. Beside her, Marcus Chen was pointing out the continents of his home world to a group of young Zilithian students. That's Africa, he was saying, where humans first evolved, and there's Asia, where my family comes from. The blue parts are oceans. Most of our planet is covered with water. One of the students, a young female named Lysa, raised her hand. Commander Marcus, is it true that humans learn to think individually before they learn to work together? That's right, Marcus replied. We spent most of our history fighting each other. It took us thousands of years to learn that cooperation was better than conquest. Lysa's silver markings pulsed with curiosity. How did you learn this? Through mistakes. Lots and lots of mistakes. And each time we made a mistake, we tried to find a better way. Zephyra smiled as she listened to the exchange. The past 6 months had been the most challenging and rewarding of her life. The mission to save Earth had been successful, but barely. Marcus and the surviving crew members had managed to intercept the Nightmare Fleet just as it reached Earth's solar system. Instead of fighting, Marcus had done something that shocked everyone involved. He had surrendered, but his surrender had come with a message to the fleet commanders. He had transmitted recordings of his negotiations with the rebel systems, showing them that there was an alternative to civil war. He had offered to stand trial for his crimes against the Empire if they would spare Earth and give the peace negotiations a chance. The fleet commanders, confused by this unprecedented offer of voluntary surrender, had agreed to return to Zilithos Prime for a proper trial. But by the time they arrived, the situation had changed completely. Emperor Kylon was dead, killed not by rebels but by the stress of maintaining mental connections with millions of panicking Zilithians across the Empire. The collective consciousness, overwhelmed by contradictory thoughts and emotions, had begun breaking down. Zilithians everywhere were experiencing individual thoughts for the first time in their species' history. With the old emperor gone and the empire in chaos, Zephyra had stepped forward to propose a new form of government. Instead of forced mental unity, she suggested voluntary cooperation. Instead of conquest, alliance. Instead of subjects, partners. The proposal had been controversial, but the alternative was the complete collapse of Zilithian civilization. After weeks of debate, the High Council had agreed to try Zephyra's approach for a trial period of 1 year. Marcus's trial had become a celebration instead of an execution. The charges against him were dropped when system after system testified that his negotiations had prevented millions of deaths in the Civil War. Instead of being condemned as a threat to the empire, he was honored as its savior. The wedding ceremony that followed was unlike anything in Zilithian history. Instead of a formal bonding ritual conducted in private, Marcus and Zephyra chose to be married in a public celebration that was broadcast throughout the galaxy. Representatives from dozens of species attended, many of them former enemies who were now allies. "It's beautiful," Lysa said, bringing Zephyra's attention back to the present. The young student was staring at Earth with wonder. "I can see why the humans love their world so much." "Wait until you meet them in person," Marcus said. "Humans are experts at being unpredictable. Every day here will teach you something new about thinking differently." That was the reason for their current mission. Earth had been transformed from a target for conquest into a training ground for other species seeking to break free from various forms of tyranny throughout the galaxy. Human military advisors, diplomats, and teachers were spreading throughout former Zilithian territory, each bringing the gift of creative, unpredictable thinking. The old Zilithian Empire no longer existed. In its place was the Galactic Alliance, a voluntary confederation of species that chose cooperation over conquest. It was smaller than the old empire, but far more dynamic. New technologies were being developed at an unprecedented rate, as different species shared their knowledge and perspectives. Marcus had become the Alliance's first human ambassador, a role that suited him perfectly. His ability to think thoughts that no one could predict made him an ideal negotiator with hostile species and a valuable advisor to the Alliance Council. But the most remarkable change was in the Zilithians themselves. Young Zilithians like Lysa were learning to maintain their telepathic connections while also developing individual personalities. They could share thoughts when cooperation was needed, but they could also think private thoughts when creativity was required. "Princess," General Thaxon's voice came through the communication system. "We're receiving a transmission from the outer system. Long-range sensors have detected unknown ships approaching." Marcus and Zephyra exchanged glances. This could be the test they had been preparing for. Not all species in the galaxy were pleased with the Alliance's success. Some saw it as a threat to their own empires. "What's their configuration?" Marcus asked as they headed to the bridge. 12 ships, heavy weapons, unknown design," Thaxon reported. "They're not responding to our communication attempts." On the bridge, Marcus studied the tactical display. The approaching ships moved in perfect formation, just like the old Zilithian fleets used to do. But their design was completely alien, covered with spikes and irregular shapes that seemed to shift and change as he watched. "Shirai Empire," Zephyra said grimly. "We've heard rumors about them from the Outer Rim. They use biological technology instead of mechanical. Their ships are actually living creatures. And they probably think the Alliance is weak because we negotiate instead of conquer," Marcus added. "This could be their way of testing us." Admiral Kess, the Alliance's senior military commander, approached them. She was a former rebel leader who had joined the Alliance after Marcus's successful negotiations. "Commander Chen, what are your recommendations?" Marcus studied the tactical display for several minutes, his mind working through possibilities that no Zilithian could have conceived. Finally, he smiled. "Admiral, what if we don't fight them at all?" "Explain." "They're expecting us to respond like the old empire would have, with overwhelming force and perfect coordination. Instead, let's do something completely unexpected. Let's invite them to dinner." The strategy worked perfectly. The Shirai ships, prepared for battle, were completely confused by the Alliance's invitation to peaceful talks. When Marcus offered to meet with their commanders personally, unarmed and alone, they agreed out of curiosity, if nothing else. The negotiations lasted 3 days. By the end, the Shirai had agreed not only to a non-aggression pact, but to a limited alliance. They were fascinated by the concept of voluntary cooperation and wanted to learn more about human unpredictability. As the Shirai ships departed peacefully, Marcus and Zephyra stood together on the bridge, watching Earth rotate slowly below them. "Do you ever regret it?" Zephyra asked. "Giving up your normal life to become part of all this?" Marcus considered the question. 6 months ago, he had been a simple military commander. Now he was married to an alien princess, helping to reshape galactic civilization and serving as humanity's representative to thousands of different species. "Never," he said firmly. "Sometimes, destiny isn't about what you're meant to do. Sometimes, it's about discovering what you're capable of becoming when someone believes in your potential." Zephyra's purple eyes sparkled with affection and respect. "And what do you think we're capable of becoming, Marcus Chen?" Marcus looked out at the stars, thinking about all the species still waiting to join the Alliance. All the new technologies that would be developed through cooperation, all the conflicts that could be resolved through understanding instead of conquest. "I think," he said slowly, "we're just getting started." In the months that followed, the Alliance continued to grow. Other ancient empires, seeing the success of voluntary cooperation, began adopting similar approaches. The galaxy was entering a new age of exploration and innovation, driven not by conquest but by curiosity. And at the center of it all was a simple truth that Marcus had discovered in an alien courtroom. Sometimes, the most powerful weapon in the universe is the willingness to think thoughts that no one else can predict.